He used my dad's voice. Hi, I'm Alex. Want to hear something really terrifying before the next story? Then get ready, because this one comes from Claire, from the rural mountains of West Virginia, and to this day, she swears what happened out there was real. When Claire was 7, her family moved into an old house tucked deep in the Appalachian Mountains. There were no neighbors for miles. The cell signal vanished once the road turned to gravel, and at night, the only sounds were the wind through the trees and the faint rush of a distant creek. Her dad used to say that kind of silence was peace, but even as a child, Claire could feel that something wasn't right. She'd spend her days exploring the woods behind the house with her dog, a huge white Great Pyrenees named Ranger. The forest was thick and heavy, the air wet and strange. The trunks twisted like broken arms, vines hung like snakes, and the ground smelled sweet and rotten, like overripe fruit left to die. One afternoon, while playing fetch, Claire realized she had wandered too far. The sound of the creek was gone, and when she looked around, nothing looked familiar. Everything seemed the same, but wrong somehow. The wind stopped. The woods went still. Then she looked down. There were bones scattered on the ground, small, thin, fragile. At first she thought they were sticks, until she noticed the shape of fingers. Panicking, she turned to retrace her steps, but the forest seemed to shift, closing in. The silence pressed against her ears. Then came a sound, a low, steady whistle. It was coming from ahead. Ranger growled, the fur on his back bristling. And then a voice. "Claire, come home, honey." It was her dad's voice, or almost. It sounded warped, dragged out like someone was trying to sound like him. Claire froze. Her chest tightened. Ranger barked furiously and charged toward the sound, then stopped short, whined, and backed away, tail between his legs, shaking violently. The voice came again. "Claire, dinner's ready." But her dad was in town that day. She knew he was. So she ran. She ran until her legs burned and her throat ached. And just when she thought she was close to home, there they were again, the bones. In the center of the clearing, something was moving. It was tall, impossibly thin, with skin stretched tight across its face. And with every word it spoke, the voice twisted, part her father, part her mother, part her own crying. "Claire." She bolted, not daring to look back, until she saw the faint light of the house through the trees. She burst through the door, sobbing. Her mother held her, whispering that it must have been the echo in the valley, or the wind playing tricks. But Claire knew what she heard. Years later, as an adult, she asked her mother, "Mom, do you remember that day in the woods when I heard Dad's voice out there?" Her mother went quiet, then sighed. "I do. And there's something I never told you." Claire waited. That land used to belong to a native tribe. They used it as a burial ground for those who starved during the harsh winters. When you told me about the voice, I called a local shaman. He came, walked the property, and said you'd been touched by the spirit of a skin taker. Claire's blood ran cold. He told me the skin taker feeds on the living. It hides in the forest, mimicking the voice of whoever you love most to lure you in. And when you get close, it doesn't eat your body, it eats your soul. Her mother paused, eyes glassy. He said, "That creature tried to take you, but rangers stopped it. When I found him that night, he was lying by the riverbank, dry and hollow, like something had drained the life right out of him." Claire couldn't speak. To this day, whenever the wind moves through the trees, she swears she hears something in it, a faint whistle, followed by a voice whispering, "Claire, come home." The Whispering House. When Evelyn was 8 years old, her father told the family about a charming old house he'd found near Lake Superior in northern Michigan. It belonged to a friend from work who rented it out during the off-season, far from any main road, surrounded by pine forest and cliffs. He said it would be the perfect place to disconnect. Her mother agreed, so they packed up for a quiet winter getaway. From the moment they arrived, Evelyn felt something watching her. The house was larger than she expected, built with dark timber, its windows clouded with age. Inside, it smelled of dust and something faintly metallic, like old blood. In the living room, a large mirror hung above the fireplace. It reflected the whole room, but when Evelyn looked into it, she could swear someone was standing just behind her, even when she turned around and saw no one. Her parents brushed off her unease. "Old houses creak," her father said. Upstairs, she and her brother Noah shared a room with 2 narrow twin beds pushed against opposite walls. The only other rooms were a bathroom, whose ceiling dripped even though there was no leak, and a study locked with an old iron keyhole. That first night, Evelyn couldn't sleep. She kept hearing whispering. Not words exactly, but soft breaths moving through the air, as if someone were talking just beneath her bed. When she asked Noah if he heard it, he said she was dreaming. The next morning, the kitchen was in chaos. Every drawer and cupboard hung open, and all the forks and knives were laid out in a perfect circle on the floor. No windows were broken, no footprints in the snow outside. Her mother swept the mess in silence, while her father muttered that it was probably some animal. But Evelyn noticed her mother's hands were trembling. That afternoon, her father insisted they explore the cliffs by the lake. The water below was frozen in parts, but the wind cut so sharply it made her eyes water. As her mother leaned over to look at the icy edge, she suddenly stumbled forward, like someone had shoved her. She fell onto her hands and knees, gasping. Her father and Noah were too far behind to have touched her. When she turned around, pale and shaking, she just whispered, "Let's go back." That night, Evelyn's fear deepened. Her mother tried to distract her by reading through an old ledger she'd found in the study, which someone had pried open earlier that day. It was filled with names, all of them crossed out in red ink, and beside each one a date. Some were over a century old. Her mother frowned, but didn't say anything. They went to bed uneasy, and in the middle of the night, Evelyn awoke to the sound of scratching on the floor. Long, slow strokes, like fingernails dragging against the wood. When she looked down, faint white marks stretched from the foot of her bed all the way towards the fireplace downstairs. The next day, Noah begged her to sleep in their room again so he wouldn't be alone. She agreed, trying to be brave. But while climbing into bed, the old iron bed frame began to tremble violently. The metal posts shook, and one snapped from the wall, crushing her hand beneath it. Her mother drove her through the snow to the nearest clinic, 30 miles away. Her wrist was fractured.
They decided to leave the house first thing in the morning. That night, her mother went outside to the frozen patio hot tub to calm down, steam rising into the cold air. Evelyn sat on the edge with her cast wrapped in a towel. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then her mother whispered, "Do you see that?" Across the frozen lake stood a figure, a woman in a long, soaked nightgown, her hair hanging stiff with ice. She was barefoot. She was staring right at them. Evelyn blinked, and the woman was gone. Years later, when Evelyn was in college, her father finally told her the truth. The man who had owned that house before them lived there with his wife and 3 children. The wife had become obsessed with the lake. She said the water spoke to her. One night, she drowned her children in the freezing shallows, then carved their initials into the floorboards. When her husband found out, he hung her from the beams above the fireplace, the same one beneath that mirror. Evelyn stared at her father in silence. "How do you know all that?" she finally asked. Her father looked down. "Because," he said quietly, "that man was my brother."
Whispers in the Woods. It was the winter of 2014 when Liam finished his first year as a wildland firefighter in Vermont. To celebrate, he and his friend Ethan went to a remote cabin in the Green Mountain Range, far from any main road, surrounded by dense forests and icy cliffs. Liam also brought a .44 Magnum revolver, just in case, he said. They spent the day gathering firewood, and when night fell, they lit a fire in front of the cabin. Music played from a Bluetooth speaker, beers in hand, as they laughed and talked. 5 minutes later, Liam heard a sound coming from behind the cabin. They froze. "Must be just the wind," Ethan said. But the sound repeated a few minutes later, a dragging, almost rhythmic noise. "Did you hear that?" "Probably some animal," Liam replied. But it wasn't anything familiar. Not a bear, moose, coyote, nothing. It was something deeper, ancient, and it seemed to be watching them. They tried to ignore it, but soon realized the sound was getting closer, like heavy, deliberate steps. "Hey, who's there?" Liam called, trying to sound confident despite the fear tightening his chest. Nothing answered. He fired once at a nearby tree. The sound echoed and then disappeared. But then they heard a deep, guttural growl, low and reverberating, that no animal in the area could produce. It was a warning. Liam and Ethan ran inside the cabin, locking the doors and closing the blinds. The next morning they went outside to investigate, but the freshly fallen snow had erased any trace of what had passed through. The following summer they returned to the cabin. Liam's uncle had recently passed away, and he needed a mountain retreat. By this time, they had completely forgotten the strange sounds from the previous winter. They arrived early and spent the day preparing firewood. When darkness fell, they went inside the cabin to rest. Liam brewed a large pot of coffee, planning to stay awake for another bonfire later. The living room had a couch facing the front door. Next to it, a large window with the curtains open. Outside, it was pitch black. They relaxed on the couch, sipping coffee, when suddenly a bright light appeared outside. Moments later, another light, and then another. With each flash, Liam heard something that sounded like a camera shutter.
seeing this?" he whispered to Ethan. The look on Ethan's face said it all. The lights continued for 10 minutes, then total silence. Then soft, dragging footsteps moved across the ground outside. Slow, deliberate steps, as if someone had traveled a long distance just to find them. Liam and Ethan grabbed their rifles and followed the sound to the front door. Suddenly, it stopped. Even after drinking 2 cups of coffee, Liam felt heavy, his mind moving in slow motion. He heard Ethan murmur, "Liam, wake up." When they opened their eyes, it was morning. Liam was on the floor next to the bed. "How did I get here?" he asked, still confused. "I don't know. I woke up in the middle of the hallway," Ethan replied. They went down to the living room. Ethan pointed at the front door. Their rifles were leaning exactly where they had aimed them the night before. "Did you put these here?" "No." "Did someone enter the cabin while we were asleep?" Later that day, a black pickup with tinted windows was parked on the mountain about a mile from the cabin. Liam probably wouldn't have noticed if he hadn't known so much about the so-called men in black, mysterious figures who for decades have visited witnesses of unexplained phenomena, threatening them never to speak of what they saw. Liam and Ethan may have witnessed something they weren't supposed to, and possibly the men in black came to make sure no one talked about it. Unfortunately, there's no way to know for sure. But if this story ever disappears without explanation, now you know why.